welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I am your host, Alex Theuma, CEO and founder of SaaStock, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Harrison Rose, who is the CEO of GoodFit. Welcome, Harrison. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, not too bad. As we just said, we're winding down for Christmas at this point, but just about hanging in there, man.
Yeah. It's a couple of days. So we're recording this a couple of days before Christmas Day. And yeah, I guess kind of as both CEOs of the company our respective companies, we're still working. I understand you're writing Christmas cards and also bringing in, the final few deals of the year, whilst I'm mainly doing content and 360 reviews as well. So slightly different perspectives, but hopefully we'll make this a good, or I'm sure we will, a good kind of festive-y podcast. And in fact, Harrison, I'm wearing a Christmas jumper, but you can only really see the stars on the top of my shoulders.
Spreading Christmas cheer, look, it's good.
I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm actually going on an elf trail later today, not work related, but I managed to let it slip to my other half, Gemma, that I was finishing about 5 o'clock today. So she said, well, that meant that I could probably take the kids on this elf trail. And of course, I'm very much looking forward to it. But there you go. So Harrison, I think it's the first time we've had you on the podcast. We've had your co-founder of the previous company that you founded, Christian, on the podcast before. But for our audience, perhaps if they don't know you, who is Harrison Rose?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm not sure I said that in earlier, but yeah, I'm Harrison. So I co-founded my first business, Paddle, alongside Christian 12 years or so ago now. He's been on the pod, I'm sure. Lines get blurry. I ran all of my go-to-market revenue and strategy there for, the 11 years or so, maybe 12. I can't remember. I'm terrible at dates. Whilst I was there, for those of you who don't know, Paddle, that's like 200 staff, $300 million rate, 3,000 customers globally. We do revenue infrastructure for software companies. Ran basically that business my whole adult life. I've been asked alongside Christian many times what other interests were along that kind of 11-year period, and we kind of said, what else other than Paddle? But step back full-time in January last year, which was one of the biggest, most intense, kind of wild decisions I've had to make. I planned to take kind of a year off or so for this year just gone, as you've kind of alluded to already. Wasn't so good at that, and I've ended up co-founding another business called GoodFit off the back of some of the unique things we were doing at Paddle. So yeah, they've been in tech and running businesses now since I was kind of 17, 18. Keep telling myself I'll have a bit of a break, but haven't been so good at that. And that's how I've ended up writing 89 Christmas cards on December 20th. Just a few days ago. Very glamorous.
Are you getting any cramp in the hands, or like are you ambidextrous, switching hands?
Yeah, no, terrible.
Yeah,
I've roped in some help this year, albeit the gifts. Maybe I can share because I'll go out later and people won't know. But we're slightly mad people, to be honest with you, at GoodFit, and I was like, I really wanted to give someone a gift that people could share. So I've actually made, I think, 150 transferable GoodFit tattoos that I'm trying to encourage people to tattoo on their body and share on social media as a part of spreading Christmas cheer. We'll see how well that goes, but that's basically the plan that we have. I think 2023's just gotten to us, but that's what we're doing.
It's a good plan, one I could subscribe to. A couple of quick ones on that. So actually my local tattooist, or the tattoo parlor where I've had a few tattoos this year, they celebrated, I think, their first birthday, and in doing so, everybody who was brave enough, and I'm sure everybody there was brave enough, got a free tattoo, which was their logo, which I thought was quite good marketing. And I also have 2 SaaStock permanent tattoos on me. So, I mean, transferable, easy. So send me one, and I'll rock it.
Mate.
Yeah, good stuff. So you mentioned you co-founded Paddle. You left Paddle after about 11, 12 years. I understand Paddle is kind of like in and around 100 million sort of ARR. And as you said, you spent most of your adult life having founded that business and then scaling that business and leading, strategy, go-to-market, et cetera, and so on. So I guess the kind of question, why did you leave when you left?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a topic that doesn't always actually get talked about. I've tried to be as open as possible about it over the past year or so. I think my situation was a little bit unique. It was certainly a bit of a shock to my peers, my co-founder and investors and board, which maybe isn't the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe with some context, I started working with Christian when I was like 17, ran the business till like to 28-ish or so. And I basically recognized it was the only thing that I'd ever known or experienced in adult life. Like, people would often say, like, how did you start a software business that handled people's like sales tax when you're like 17, 18? I was like, God knows how. Or what was it like handling all that pressure? And it was like, it's kind of the only thing I ever knew. I was very grateful for all of those experiences, but it was kind of when we were going into the Series D, which happened, the year before, basically, that was something that was probably meant to be objectively exciting for us. It was a huge fundraise. We were likely to hit, and we did, the kind of fabled unicorn status. We were acquiring a business called ProfitWell and Price Intelligently that Christian and I and others have discussed over many years, actually, about acquiring over dinner tables and stuff. And all of that stuff was meant to be objectively exciting. And it really struck me, though, that I just felt like I'd seen that story before, like the DD, the budgeting, the planning of the integration with acquired companies before. And that really confused me, to be honest with you, like just not having that motivation. Like, I really prided myself on the energy that I bring to a lot of the work that I did. And for the first time, not feeling that was quite surprising. And I think I'd basically been working with an executive coach for a number of years, something I'd recommend to any founders listening as soon as they can afford it. And I think I just got to the point where I realized I was more interested, I think, in getting to know myself a little bit better than I was in continuing to scale and learning a paddle. Like, I recognize that your entire like identity, friendships, mind share gets so wrapped and intertwined with this entity in paddle that I was just keen to get to know myself outside of that context and experience life for a new lens. So sharing with that with people was pretty intense. The board asked me just to do a sabbatical and maybe return, but I ended up just taking a step back. But it was quite the emotional roller coaster, man.
I can imagine it. And Christian's reaction was he at first was saying, like, what are you doing, Harrison? You know, how can you leave me? How did that conversation go?
We actually lived together the first 4 years of Paddle's existence. And when we stopped living together, the board and the investors called that the great breakup. They hadn't preempted this coming later down the line. Yeah. But you felt like you're betraying like one of your best mates that you've been through all this stuff with. And even more so, Christian was the same age as me. And I was so grateful to having gone through a lot of those experiences with someone else who kind of grew up together through Paddle. And in stepping back, it felt like a little bit of betrayal for the company, to our employees, to him. I also felt like I was removing the opportunity for him to do the same thing, because no doubt he also had felt a level of burnout or wanting a break at times. So that felt quite selfish, but something that I felt like I needed to do. So it was really difficult to have that conversation. But he was amazing. He was super, super supportive. Again, was desperate to find some way in which I could continue or come back in some way. But he was just overwhelmingly supportive, which was awesome. It didn't make the conversation much easier, but it was the board too. Like, as much as they were like, have a sabbatical, come back, don't ever do it, like make it 2 months. I was just like, given my intentions and desire to just experience life and not constantly just be thinking about Paddle or be Harrison at paddle.com, I'm not sure that's helpful for the business or me. So made it a firm break, expecting to do very little for the next year, and ease myself out of the business over a 6-month period or so. And then somehow ended up here. I'm really, really grateful for how people kind of reacted during that.
So did you have a full year-long break? And within that year, you didn't? No. So how long before you found yourself getting back into business?
No. So it was the January last year. So not in 2023, 2022 that I stepped back. I worked throughout all of 2021 and in I think I'm getting those years right. 2022 January, I think I stepped back. What are we in now? January 2023? That's probably right. I'm terrible at dates, honestly. But it was basically like through I had probably 4 months probably off. It was like April time. I explored a lot of stuff. Some investor friends and new ones, kind of explored whether I wanted to go and work with them as investors and partners. There were lots of C-level kind of offers at various companies, maybe mid to late stage. Again, I didn't really fancy that. And I thought I was just going to take a long break. but that didn't quite happen. I ended up joining my old colleague and best friend, Alex, in running GoodFit, which made sense at the time. We could talk through that decision making if you want, but yeah, that's kind of where I ended up.
Yeah, I think actually it's a good segue. So why take that CEO role at GoodFit? Why them? And at that point.
Yeah, I think in the short kind of 4 months that I had, like that was terrifying, by the way. Waking up on like January the 1st, like it was a clean break over Christmas, and not having 8 hours worth of Zoom calls to go into. It's just like, what the hell do I do with my day now? Like it was wild. But in that time, I did have obviously the stereotypical trip to Thailand to just kind of find myself, of course. Yep. But I spent a really long time trying to think about what things kind of brought me joy. And I really used that as a framework actually to decide whether I did certain things or committed to certain things. I didn't actually tick off many of those boxes. And I'll come back to that in assessing GoodFit. But I think it's really important to talk about how GoodFit came about as to why it made sense for me to join. So at Paddle, we were going to market in some quite unique ways using data from the very first day that we started. So much so that investors were as interested in that at every fundraise that we did as they were in Paddle itself, which was actually quite frustrating at times. And what we were doing with the data really took a step up when we had a guy called Alex, straight out of uni, no coding experience, amazing story of his. Long story short, our investors eventually, he started running RevOps with me and data to some degree. And long story short, the investors were like, we'd really love for you to replicate this in other portfolio companies. I didn't ask him to leave the business and go and set up as a product, but kind of let him know that was a possibility. And obviously he went and did so, my blessing. I advised him from day one. He's like my best mate. And then obviously 4 months in, when your best mate's knocking on your door, you've been twiddling your thumbs. He's basically launched a product which was kind of your brainchild at Paddle as to how you're going to market. It's very difficult to say no to your best mate.
Yeah.
And it also did tick a lot of the boxes that were important to me. I wanted to spend more time with my friends. I wanted to grow with other people, continue to grow myself. I won't bore you with the full framework, but it ticked a lot of boxes. So I eventually said yes on some very specific conditions, which were also quite important. And he was great. He was awesome. He's given me 50% of the business, given that I kind of came up with the idea back in Paddle, and he took it on. So was really gracious in it too. So yeah, said yes on some conditions at least.
And specifically, like, can you just share with us what does GoodFit do, and maybe a little bit about data, on the company itself, just to paint that picture?
Yeah, absolutely. So GoodFit basically provides data to sales and marketing teams. SaaStock are a customer, Clary, all sorts of folks, basically B2B teams targeting other businesses with sales, sometimes marketing as well. We supply lists of accounts and contacts for people to go and sell in a very unique way that I won't bore you with, but happy to talk to people about if they're ever interested. The business, it's a couple of years old. Alex has been doing this for longer than I've been here, but it's going really well. The company's growing 100% year on year, exclusively via word of mouth and referral. We're not spending any dollars on sales and marketing right now, because there was this kind of like queue of people lining up to utilize data in the way that we had at Paddle before he even started, which I was very quick to tell him is not normal for people launching new startups. Typically, about just over $1 million ARR, about to start outbound and really accelerating things next year. And I think it was important for me, having got in the business, to just establish like the product fundamentals to start with, like can we deliver data scalably and reliably and quickly for our clients, as well as some other challenges. But yeah, we're really about to put the burners on, but have got some very, very big multi-billion-dollar clients already, as well as some smaller startups. Things go pretty well. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at as a business.
Are you planning
very different, jumping back to a kind of 5-6 person company from a multi-hundred for sure.
I guess kind of on that point, like, are you enjoying that obviously more 5-6 person company than 300 person organization? Is that more you? Certainly for the moment.
I actually think no. Like, and this is one of the other topics you and I were kind of back and forth thinking, right? Like, we talk a lot about why founders sometimes step back from businesses. Sometimes actually, I think that's like greenwashed to some degree, to be completely honest with you. But a lot of the time you hear, founders really enjoy the early stages. Like, they love getting their hands dirty and solving a problem before handing it off to someone else. I actually think I enjoyed like Series C time for Paddle by far and above the most. I didn't enjoy going to bed every day, not wondering whether we were going to have enough revenue to survive, and really enjoyed building a machine, to be honest with you, as opposed to going from 0 to 1. I enjoyed that too. But it wasn't the desire to go back to an early stage, which led me to join GoodFit. It was much more so being able to support a friend of mine, give back to him in the way that he had to paddle, give some opportunities and some shots to some other people who I'm not sure we quite gave enough responsibility or freedom to in the past, and some other things. So it wasn't necessarily going back to those early stages which attracted me the most. If anything, it's just really different. But it wasn't that. That is certainly the case, I think, for a lot of founders, that they just miss the days of being on the ground with every single one of their staff and grinding out product market fit and go-to-market fit. That's been enjoyable, but again, I think we accelerated through those phases quite quickly at GoodFit, just given the nature and the demand for what we were doing before we even started. Albeit our ambitions are very different. Some of the constraints that I talked about with Alex going into the business were, I probably wasn't ready to jump into another 10-year journey, to be honest with you, having just been on one. So I was like, look, I'll give you 4 years full-time operationally. I think within that time frame, I can get us to X in revenue. At that point in time, we can either go and raise a big round. There's been a lot of investor attention already, to be completely honest with you, or sell the business, look at M&A, whatever. And in that time, I'd like to control our own destiny, control the pace of growth, decide our own outcomes without a board, etc. And so it's very different, to be honest with you. So I'm enjoying the new and the learning, as opposed to just being back at an earlier stage. Like running a bootstrap business is completely different.
Yeah.
This time around.
Yeah. Well, and also great to be very clear with Alex, at the outset, and no pretenses that, hey, I could be running this to 100 million ARR or, for the next 10 years and putting your stake in the ground there. And yeah, I think that topic about founders when they decide to leave the businesses that they've founded and the reasons why. And as you said, it's a little bit sort of greenwashed, and you see it, but in the way that it's talked about is very much a kind of often a PR kind of dressed way. I coincidentally saw just today in our Slack channel, but I don't know when it was actually posted, but the announcement of the CEO of Lattice. He's moving to exec chair, and he's been there for 8 years. And, was talking about all the reasons why he was sort of not leaving, but, moving to exec chair and the new CEO coming in. But it did feel very much kind of like, like PR's kind of had its way with this announcement. And what I've seen, I think, so your tenure with like Paddle was, as you say, like 11, 12 years, which is great, right? And from 17 to, 29. And you see a lot of founders, perhaps around that sort of 8-year mark, really perhaps having these existential questions about, whether they are the right person, whether they still have that fire in their belly, whether the company has outgrown them, whether they're having that same amount of fun or not. And it must be very difficult to, continuously, whilst being long on the company, have that same level of fun. There'll be those ups and downs. But often it seems to be, but maybe after sort of year 8, and I don't know if there's what data there is around that founders often sort of move on in some capacity.
Yeah.
But like I guess your own personal experience of what you've seen, why do you think this happens? Maybe I've touched on maybe some of the reasons, but why do you think this happens quite commonly, right?
Yeah, and I think the people in the 8-year marks as well, like these tend to be the success stories, right? Their companies have endured for that long. And as much as those people are stepping out into maybe a less operational role, they've probably done a phenomenal job over that period. Like, it's my belief and assumption, chatting to a lot more founders, that it happens quite commonly and earlier, but probably in slightly less ceremonial fashions, which is really unfortunate. And just something that doesn't get talked about that often, to be completely honest with you. And I think the most common reason for it, we should be talking about it as founders to founders in order to try and avoid that fate if people don't want it. We should be talking about the why, I think. And like, I guess I would assume or feel chatting to people is for 3 reasons, right? Sometimes founders just aren't enjoying themselves, to be fair. Like at a different stage, right? The skills and the things that you do, what's expected of you at different stages of the business are very, very different, quite frankly. And that's certainly true in year 10 versus year 0, right? So there's that. And I think this is probably most common, that founder skill sets often just aren't suited to some of the larger organizational requirements that folks have. I chatted to a number of founders that have gone through the IPO phase, for example. And this is also always something that worried me. Like, it didn't seem like an experience that I wanted or was going to enjoy, to be completely honest with you. And fortunately, I think the spotlight would have been more on Christian anyway as the CEO. But that's quite a grueling experience that you need to be up for. But I really enjoyed the 0 to kind of 100 kind of revenue, as you said. And then last but not least, it's like there's also the point that I didn't really think about in advance. But I think you're completely right. And I see it in our executives too, whereby when you're solving the same problems or similar veins of problems every single day for 8 years in similar ways, in a similar context, in a similar industry, like getting a little bit lethargic is probably only normal. Like I think the longest tenured executives we had, like head of and above at Paddle, were probably 5 years as opposed to 8. And like when both of those, and I can think of two very directly who worked directly under me and I hired myself, left the company, they'd done a phenomenal job. Like they'd been amazing. They'd taken us from whatever, low millions of dollars in revenue to high tens, and objectively been awesome. And there was no shame in being like, you guys probably just feel a little bit tired of solving these problems. Maybe this stage is beyond you, maybe it's not, but I'm not sure you have the energy and drive you did. And even the people that are hearing your voice every day probably could do with just a different perspective on this stuff at this point in time. Like think about sports and the kind of merry-go-round of manager changes and things. Sometimes people just need a different motivator. So I think that's certainly a part of it too, but they're probably the 3 most common reasons, I'd say, which are difficult to talk about, but I think are certainly true.
What about yourself during that 11, 12-year period? And speaking of like motivation, and maybe there were moments, there were mornings or there were weeks where you're just feeling like, you know, a little bit more kind of lethargic around that. Was there anything that you did personally or that you can do to kind of get over that a little bit? Because, you know, like certainly at that point, you're not thinking, well, you know, I'm going to leave at some point, right? Because you still sort of, this is my business, you know, I'm in a co-founder role, but you know, just this week I'm just feeling flat, or like today I just, you know, I can't be bothered or whatever, right? You know, these are just natural human emotions, right? But what were things that perhaps you did to kind of help you maybe get over that if you experienced it?
Yeah, I think maybe not directly that. Honestly, like I really felt that I tried to turn up every day at Paddle and bring my full authentic self, and also bring a lot of energy to both everything that I was doing. Like I kind of have a personal mantra on like, I really struggle not to do the very best job that I can in anything that I'm doing, regardless of how gross and gross important it is. And like I try to turn up with that level of positivity and energy all the time. Yeah. It was actually the point in time in which I felt like I was struggling to do that for the first time, which actually triggered my thoughts around, oh my God, this is very different for me. Like I feel like I don't necessarily want to prep for this meeting or be here or listen as intently as I perhaps once did, which was really confusing. And it was really important to me to kind of maintain that persona and that professional credibility that I was really proud of with our investors and organization, which is why I was keen to get ahead of the problems, right? That's something I'd certainly encourage people to do. If you notice this behavior in yourself, it's probably time to do something about it. Maybe not as extreme as leaving your company, but you should acknowledge it and work with the coach now or think about it, because the worst thing that you can do is ruin a reputation that you've built in growing a great company and hiring and work with a load of great folks because you're burnt out or tired or whatever. So don't let this stuff settle, like do something about it, my suggestion. But I think there's a lot of different things that are required, even in the competency side, which I think is actually the reason that most people leave, is that as companies grow and scale, the skills that are required are very different, and people struggle to keep up with those things. I'm completely honest with you. Like I think about boards hiring in their own folks all the time. Like it happens all the time. And I think there's a bunch of stuff that's required of you in order to keep up with that if you're going from 0 to $100 million in revenue. Like I think at the least, something we talked about obsessively was that if your business is growing at like 300% year on year, like you need to grow at a faster rate than your company. Otherwise you're going to get left behind. That's true of you as founders, but everyone within the business as well. And I think about Christian or myself, and it's easy to look at someone else sometimes, but like Christian, when we first started Power, to Christian today is night and day difference in like confidence, speaking, like his willingness to motivate folks. Like it's so different. And unless you can look back on yourself 6 months ago and just like not see change, you're probably falling behind and may eventually have to get exited because you're just not keeping up with the demands of the business which are growing. If you are.
Obviously, you both build this, you know, let's say and it's not fact checked, but I've heard anecdotally 100 million ARR sort of business, right? So that's an incredible feat. What were some of the things that you did right as co-founders, and maybe, some of the things that you did wrong, and perhaps you're happy to kind of share, and if you went back in time, you could do it all over again, you wouldn't make some of those mistakes?
Yeah, I was having to think about this advance, right? So the obsessive, like, needing to get ahead of the company growth in yourself, I think it's important. But I think it's probably really important you focusing on the right areas. I think generally we could all be more reflexive just as people. So I encourage people to work with coaches and mentors, to be honest with you. And like recognizing where you're both enjoying, you're spending your time, recognizing where you're weak, recognizes where you're willing and able to let others do work that maybe you're weak out and not enjoying, regardless of title as well. Sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes a split in responsibilities between me and Christian in titles was just really weird, but it didn't matter. I'd run founder all hands to motivate it all because I was very comfortable doing that. Christian was much better fundraising, like whatever, it doesn't matter. And that sometimes be really, really difficult, either recognizing where you're not so good or letting go of something that you think you should be doing that otherwise couldn't. Sometimes we struggled on the culture piece, right? It's like, do we palm this off to a chief people officer? We should kind of be leading the culture. What does that look like in an organization? These are quite difficult discussions to have. And they're really, really important if you're not going to get outgrown, because you can't do everything. And there's going to be things you're better at or worse at, and things you enjoy or don't enjoy. So I think that's probably quite important, just really spending a lot of time reflecting on that over time. And also just being ruthless with change around the people that are supporting you. Ultimately, you're building a team to make up for those things that you don't want to do, or your weaknesses, or to drive you forward. And I think something we could have done better, but still did pretty intensely, was just being ruthless with change around that exec team. I kind of think about 3 or 4 different phases of exec team that we had, like the head of marketing, head of people, and chief product officer we had at Series A. It wasn't the same at B2D, and isn't now the same at D+. They're literally completely different groups of people.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't cling on to some of those individuals. They'll have done you a good job from A to B or C to D, whatever it is, and that's okay. But the loyalty they've shown you in the work that they've done doesn't mean that they're the right people to do the next job, and it's actually doing them a disservice, keeping them in a role that they're not suited for. So I think being reflexive about what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you would like to see doing versus not, and then building the team around that set of requirements is something to be quite obsessive about in growing your business, basically.
Yep. Good advice, lessons learned shared there. So appreciate that. So we're going to move into the quickish fire round now, Harrison. So can you share with us what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Probably that, to be fair. I think recognizing that you need to work on yourself as well as your business, and the impact that has on you, making you a better executive, but also the impact it can have on all those around you, was just like a real unlock for me. Like recognizing how my behaviors were impacting others, not just myself, was a huge unlock for sure.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Lots of advice that was very required at the time. I imagine each and every time. I think probably the one that hit hardest was that you don't need to wait till the end of the journey to start enjoying it. I treated myself, I think, like pretty poorly at times in the early stages of Paddle, just completely focused on running the business and growing it, thinking I was going to have a great time at the end when we sold it or whatever. But giving yourself permission to enjoy the ride too, I think is really important, just for you and your sustainability, I think, throughout that. So that's something I'd encourage others to think about.
100%. What about, maybe we've covered some of this, but the biggest mistakes you've made, lesson learned?
One we haven't covered, we didn't linearly grow the business in the early days. Like we were growing at 300% year on year for 5 years. We had max 15 people, I think, throughout that, and didn't grow the team. There wasn't a hiring plan year on year. We really didn't know what we were doing at the start. And then we had to add 100 people in 8 months. And that indigestion just lost us probably 18, maybe longer, months worth of solid growth, because we weren't gradually growing the business, and then just at one point realized what we were doing wasn't sustainable. So I'd have definitely been growing the business linearly as opposed to these mad jumps over time, because everything broke, man. It was brutal, including the office. We knocked down 2 walls and hired 100 scooters at one point. Sorry for another day.
I do remember a point where Paddle was moving office every 4 to 5 months or something like that, which couldn't have been easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about, have you got a favorite book on business, on entrepreneurship? That's what one to share.
Yeah, it's probably shocking that I don't. Like, I was chatting to Hiroki, who's the founder of Coke Cardless, the other day about this. I probably should do more reading. I learn a lot from others, I think, and articles as opposed to books. I think I probably have them by category. In sales, and like the spin selling was really impactful for me personally as like a leader. What got you here, what got you there was quite good. On life, probably the happiness equation. They're three that made me good look at. If I could tie myself to the master one of them.
Yep. What about, do you do anything for your mental health and wellness?
I'm really obsessed with cycling. I started to take an hour for lunch every day in around COVID time when we weren't getting outside. I cycle, eat and shower every day during that on my watt bike and on Zwift. It's changed my life, to be fair. I absolutely love it. I've never been fitter and healthier, so encourage people to do the same.
Awesome, good stuff. Well, we come to the end of the show now, Harrison. If people want to reach out, find you, what's the best way to find you online and also learn more about GoodFit?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's best for me. Harrison Rose on there, relatively active, so we should be able to chat on there. Connect if you wish. GoodFit's at goodfit.io, and I'm at Harrison at goodfit.io if you want to reach out. And yeah.
Awesome, good stuff. Well, only another 96 Christmas cards to write after this and to get them in the post before the postman wraps up for Christmas. So I hope you're able to do it. But really enjoyed speaking with you. Thanks so much for coming on the show for the first time, sharing openly and honestly. Obviously, congrats with everything you've done with Paddle, and very exciting with what you're doing with GoodFit. And as you said, SaaStock are a happy customer as well. So it's all good stuff. So Harrison, thank you so much, and Merry Christmas. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you in 2024.
Thanks, Sue. See you soon. Thanks for having me.